The coronavirus has hit all of us hard, some of us more than others. For today, tens of thousands of people across the nation are grieving the loss of a loved one. Could be a spouse or a friend, could be a child or a brother, could be a parent or a neighbor or a coworker. Regardless, the grief has hit us in the midst of the social isolation, making our grief even harder. Because where do you go? Where do you turn to? There's no group of people that you can run to, no person that can hug you, no gathering of the family or church. There's no wake or funeral. And perhaps you weren't even able to be there when your loved one died. What do you do? How do you make it through? Pivot Family Foundation has produced this series of videos of experts in the field of grief and bereavement to give tips and guidance and wisdom to help you navigate this season, and to remind you of something very simple but very powerful. You are not alone. Though you may feel like you are, you're not. There are people who are with you and who are for you. So thanks for watching, and find encouragement in the days ahead. Hey everyone, allow me to introduce to you Claire Bidwell-Smith. Claire is an internationally renowned author, speaker, and grief expert. She's authored 3 books, The Rules of Inheritance, After This, When Life is Over, Where Do We Go? Anxiety, The Missing Stage of Grief. Claire speaks at numerous events and leads workshops and retreats on both writing and grief. And Claire, we are delighted to have you with us today. I know that you are busy from what you've already told me this morning, and we appreciate you investing your time in us and during this most unusual time in history. So thank you for being with us.
I'm happy to be here.
Cool. Now, your experience with grief is very personal. From what I've read, you experienced some grief early on in your life. Can you share with us some about that, what that was like for you?
Sure. So yeah, both of my parents got cancer at the same time when I was 14, and I'm an only child. My mom died when I was 18 as a freshman in college, and then my father died 7 years later when I was 25. So I really entered into adulthood and went through my adolescence in a lot of grief and loss and illness. And it was very difficult. I definitely hit some low places trying to navigate my way through that. Most of my peers were going through the post-college stuff and, jobs and new relationships. And I was really grappling with life itself and mortality and a lot of anxiety and depression. As I came through it, I really started to want to do something meaningful and do something useful with all this knowledge I had about grief. Went back and got my master's in clinical psychology in my late 20s, worked in hospice for a number of years as a counselor, and then I opened a private practice. And along the way, I just kept writing. That was always my way of moving through all those big feelings and hard stuff. So I wrote the 3 books, and yeah, it's been a journey, but all this time, it's been over a decade I've been doing this work, and I never imagined that the whole world would be going through grief and loss, all at once. So it's a really interesting time right now.
Yeah. Now, when you were going through that in your adulthood with your parents, did you ever feel like that sense of isolation, that you were the only one going through that, and you just kind of felt in that moment by yourself?
Absolutely. I think grief is always a lonely process. I think it's something that's very personal, and often most people around you can't quite understand the depth of what you're feeling.
Right.
And then for me, again, my peers were in such a different place in life. I didn't know anybody who'd lost a parent. I didn't know anybody who'd been through the kind of stuff that I had gone through.
Right.
I cared for my father in his dying days. It was intense stuff for my age. So I felt very alone much of the time.
Wow. Well, this coronavirus has got a lot of us shut down. I mean, all of us really shut down. And many are grieving that loss. Tens of thousands of people today are going through that because of losses that we've already experienced through this. So my question to you would be is, why grief is hard just in a normal routine? Mm-hmm. Why is it harder when you grieve in isolation, like we're being almost forced to do at this time?
I think some of it is just that lonely feeling. I think there's something heartening that we're all going through it at the same time, yet we're all by ourselves. And when we're grieving, we're so vulnerable. The emotions cause us to be so volatile, so up and down, and we need a lot of support when we're in that kind of state. Also, ritual and custom, memorials, funerals, these are really important parts of the grieving process. And when we can't do those, when we can't say goodbye in person to our loved ones, and we can't get a hug from somebody who can support us, when we can't, attend a memorial, hold a wake, go to a funeral, those are really difficult things to not be able to do right now.
Right. And so when you're by yourself, you can't do those things. It just magnifies that. Mm-hmm. The unique situation of people that can't be with their loved ones when they die. Speak to that. Does that magnify the grief? I mean, I know it does. How does it magnify the grief for people?
I think it really complicates it. It extends the process. Not everybody gets to say goodbye to their loved ones in general. That's not always possible. And when I've worked with people in that case, they really do need to find ways after the person is gone to say goodbye on an internal level, on a spiritual level, a religious level. There has to be some kind of closure that they seek. Otherwise, it spills out in anxiety, depression, extended periods of grieving. And so I think we're going to see a lot of that right now. People are going to be feeling that. I think there are things we can do at home. I think we can create our own sense of ritual. We can light candles. We can put up photos. We can post virtual memorials. And I don't think people should shy away from doing that. I think it's a really important part of it. I think when we are able to emerge from this crisis and come back out into the world and go back to more regular ways of doing things, there will be a collective mourning that will happen. Oh, yeah. There will be a big grieving that we will do together. But until we can do that, I think we must find ways to have our own personal sense of ritual and memorial.
Yeah. I think part of it is the reality we can't control what we're in right now. Mm-hmm. It's beyond we didn't ask for this. We didn't sign up for going through this type of experience at all. And then when you add grief to that, we didn't plan on this either. And so how do we respond? And I'll use the phrase in a healthy way. Mm-hmm. I mean, you mentioned some ideas and some strategies, I suppose. What are some healthy responses to grief that you found to be helpful for people?
Well, first and foremost is to really let yourself grieve. I think, the emotions of grief are much bigger and more surprising than people realize. If you haven't been through grief before, it's a really big emotional process. There's a lot of crying, there's anger, there's frustration, there's anxiety, there's depression. But that's part of it. We have to lean into it. We have to let ourselves feel things. If you're crying a lot, that's okay. That is healthy. Mm-hmm. Even some anger is healthy. This is a frustrating situation, that again, we've been forced into it. Anger is natural. When we start to get into places where it's harming ourselves or our relationships, or we're turning to more unhealthy habits, checking out through substance abuse or just various things like that, those are more unhealthy. But healthy looks like crying and sometimes anxiety. It looks like asking for help, needing people to help you and support you emotionally, needing people to listen. Those are healthy responses to grief.
You think anger is a bigger issue now in this grieving situation we're in?
I do. I think there's a lot of anger about just being forced into this situation, but then also there's so much misinformation, confusion. Mm-hmm. A lot of people aren't quite sure what's happening. We were not prepared for this. There was no way in which we were really prepared for this pandemic. So there's a lot of situations in which, people may be dying that didn't have to, or you maybe could have been there and weren't. There's just so many things that are going to be having to sort through afterwards. And there will be some anger. I think it's generally a part of the grieving process. It's one of the 5 stages for sure. But anger is not always a bad thing. It's a very powerful emotion, and it's often easier to feel angry than it is to feel sad. And it kind of fuels us. It keeps us a little active. Mm-hmm. But almost always underneath the anger is sadness. If you peel that back, you're really just sad that this happened. You're sad that we weren't prepared. You're sad that you lost your person. You're sad that you couldn't be there.
Yeah. So we have the emotional side of that grief that we're struggling with underneath a lot of what we're doing, whether it's loneliness or fear or anxiety or anger that you mentioned, or guilt that we may be going through. So how do we practically take those emotions and do something with them?
Mm-hmm.
We can't hug a person. We can't go to a funeral. We can't go to our church.
Yeah.
Are there some practical ideas or strategies you can give us to help walk through this time? Thanks for watching this episode. I'm glad you found some encouragement and guidance and wisdom to get you through this season of life. This coronavirus will one day end. So will the quarantine. And you'll be able to reconnect with family and friends and to find some healing from that personal touch of being with them. You can't change the past. It's permanent and it's gone. But you can choose a new future. You can choose to move forward in your life, which is what you've actually done by watching this video. You've taken a step to find healing even in the midst of social isolation. So congratulations to you. I hope you will share this video with others and help them find the encouragement and healing that they need to. Thanks so much.